Chapter 15. "This ship is amazing," Wyatt muttered while scrolling through his display screen. The 12 Royal Marines present were busy manning a station or keeping an eye on the prisoners. The remaining 8 Royal Marines were manning the frigate-class black ship and were following them slowly. The damage the vessel received wasn't enough to risk a sudden malfunction or, worse, suffer a core overload, but it meant that they were powerless in a fight. "I don't know much about ships, but I must agree," Cynthia said from the captain's chair. Wires came out of her armor, connecting her to the ship's command center and giving her full access to the ship. "In your opinion, Wyatt, what makes it amazing? All I can see is the firepower and the speed it can reach." "It's not just that, though. It is far above any destroyer class in the Royal Navy. Even most cruisers and battlecruisers would be hard-pressed to match it," Wyatt exclaimed with genuine eagerness. "It has 50 PD turrets, a small hangar bay that can fit an entire wing of Raptor fighters, 8 plasma cannons, 4 railguns, 4 heavy laser turrets, 2 torpedo launchers, 8 missile pods, and a spinal-mounted pulse beam cannon. This thing is a monster," he said, chuckling to himself. "On the defensive, unlike the other black ships, this one doesn't sacrifice survivability. Reinforced titanium armor with a nano-enhanced carbon polymer for superstructural resistance. The shields are on par with a battlecruiser. Better if I were to take a guess, and it has double layer shielding. How is that even possible?" He chuckled to himself, too enamored with the details of the ship. The engines, when put at full speed, would outrun the royal yacht easily. And how does it power it all? With a tri-reactor plasma core. What about its stealth capabilities? All I'm seeing is the exterior hull is another layer of armor nicknamed Boogeyman armor, she said, confused. "Do you know what Boogeyman means?" "I believe it has some relation to an evil spirit," Wyatt replied. "There are folktales back on Volantis speaking about supernatural creatures. I recall Boogeyman being in some of those stories, particularly one about a spirit of ice and mischief helping other kind-hearted spirits battle the Boogeyman. In that tale, this spirit used the shadows to move unnoticed. Perhaps the nickname is fitting to the purpose of these stealth ships. If so, then I can see why the manufacturers would keep the real name of the armor as a secret, along with any information about how it was made," Cynthia replied. "That, however, does not explain how the stealth system works." "I don't fully understand it either, but it seems like the Boogeyman exterior plating is not really armor. It runs small electromagnetic distortion fields across the entire hull, pushing away radar and sensor signals. No wonder locking on didn't work, and why the only real way to see them was when they were so close that their stealth systems stopped being effective," Wyatt hummed. "Even the engines are designed to match the background radiation at a distance, hiding the plume under a certain margin of thrust. Whoever designed them is a certified genius," he said, truly admiring whoever the designer was. "For landing and boarding actions, there are 2 Mantis tanks, 16 hot drop pods, 20 orbital drop pods, 12 shuttles, and several dozen life pods for emergency evacuations. The ship is also designed to make boarding actions confusing and tardy," he said, eyes narrowing. "I wonder why they chose to face us outside instead of trying to stop us inside." "Honor dictates that a boarding action can only be engaged in space, Wyatt," Cynthia replied with mild disgust. "It wouldn't have mattered at any rate. If anything, they only made our job a minute faster, if that." "Honor. Honor. Why are nobles so obsessed with something so damn useless? Honor won't help them when they have a gun pressed against their thick-headed skulls," Wyatt thought with disdain as he glanced at the bloodstain left behind by Samuel Caston's corpse. After leaving the station, the Royal Marines carried every corpse inside the ship to the airlock and ejected them in full disgrace as so much trash. That included Samuel Caston. "Regardless," he continued, "that's not all. Cybersecurity seems to be top of the line, too. I don't understand it, but even I can see it is far and above most of what we have here in the Principality." "Ah, so it does have comm scramblers," he hummed for a moment. "The ship sacrifices some luxury in return, though. No segregated mess halls for once, and the quarters are smaller and more compact even for the officers. The storage bay is also smaller than other destroyer-class ships, but the ammunition bays are expanded. No surprise there," he pressed on. "Life support systems are fully operational. There's a small hydroponic garden on Wing B, Section C, an advanced infirmary, a lounge hall, barracks, armory, weapon lockers, A lot of them, and secret lockers across the hallways in case of emergencies. An engineering bay equipped with a factory and ore processing wing? He said, surprised. Ah, that explains the mining drones, Cynthia replied. This ship is capable of self-repairing itself and its basic components. Only battleships have such capabilities in the Principality, she added, unable to hide her surprise. Aside from that, the rest is fairly standard. Training facilities, a gymnasium, a secure vault, a war room, and a brig, Wyatt finished, whistling, impressed. This truly is a warship. And you named it Nor Navio, Wyatt, Cynthia addressed, barely refraining from sighing in frustration. Enlighten me, Wyatt. Why of all things did you name it Black Ship? I'm not particularly creative, he replied, managing to hide a snicker at the end. One wasn't enough, was it? She muttered. What was that? Wyatt asked, pushing his luck. Nothing. Do not concern yourself with it, Cynthia replied. It is a travesty that a ship like this was in the hands of traitors. Now it can serve a just purpose. Of that, I'm certain. This ship is a powerhouse in its own right, capable of trading blows with any ship of the line. But the speed, the maneuverability, and the firepower make it a dangerous force to be reckoned with. Perfect to execute decapitating and devastating alpha strikes on clueless foes. I am glad we don't have to face this monster in battle. Wyatt thought, relieved and happy that the prince now had such a capable ship under his command. Several minutes went by in silence until the Royal Marine manning the sensors spoke up. Lady Cynthia, I have detected a large warp signature entering the system, he said, his voice distorted through a static filter that made his voice sound monotone yet aggressive. Can you detect the signatures? She asked. Negative. Sensors are being blocked. Confirmed. Jamming has been detected. We are unable to identify signatures. Cynthia glanced at the worried, confused prisoners. Galt Tirom, she called out, and one of the Royal Marines guarding the prisoners piked the man up to his feet. Explain. I don't know who they are, Galt replied. We expected no further reinforcements. Guarding the key's whereabouts was the last secret entrusted to me by Lord Samuel. I truly do not know anything else. Lady Cynthia, the Royal Marine called to her. Permission to activate scanners? No, I'll order the other ship to do it. I won't risk giving our position up, she said, and her eyes briefly flashed. Wyatt focused on his display screen, now changed to an empty tactical display marking only the now empty station, Woodshaft, and the two ships flying toward it, with the frigate-class Black Ship ahead of them by a significant margin. 2 minutes passed slowly, but instead of receiving a verbal confirmation from Cynthia, his display now marked 5 dots quickly accelerating toward Woodshaft. 2 cruiser-class and 3 destroyer-class ships packed in a tight formation. Judging by their speed, they would reach Woodshaft in an hour. The lieutenant narrowed his eyes. The fleet wasn't Principality standard since he didn't detect any escorts. It was possible that these ships were jamming them to mask the arrival of more ships, possibly black ships, but he doubted it. If they're not traitors, then what are they? He asked, turning to the nervous red-haired man. I don't know. They could be pirates, Galt countered hurriedly. No need to guess anymore, Cynthia spoke up, hissing angrily. The ships have been identified. It's a Drazen raiding party. The prisoners gasped in horror, the realization of such a force dawning on them. The Royal Marines remained impassive, but Wyatt froze up, not in fear. The pilot felt his blood boil inside his veins, his heart beating hard and fast in his chest, and his left hand clenched into a fist. Drazen? Here? He muttered coldly. Cynthia and Galt turned their attention to the pilot only to find him shaking slightly. Cynthia, how far are we from Woodshaft? An hour and a half at our current speed. I can cut that time in half without sacrificing our stealth, she replied seriously. Can we intercept their fleet? Wyatt asked. In theory, yes, but I doubt we could inflict serious casualties. The ship lacks an AI and we are doing everything manually. Perhaps we could cripple one of their destroyers, she replied brusquely. It matters not. I shall not allow a single one of those wretched creatures to touch my princess. Wait, Wyatt half shouted, standing up. These are Drazen we are dealing with. I am more than familiar with them, he hissed angrily, taking off his helmet. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply in an effort to calm his racing heart. They will get close to the station and start hurling boarding pods and hammering away at the defenses. Their objective isn't to destroy, but to capture as many prisoners as possible. Think, Cynthia. If we rush over to Woodshaft to reinforce Clara, that will take away one powerful ship out of the fight and give them more space to move around. Cynthia gritted her teeth but couldn't argue against his logic. 10 Royal Marines won't be enough to protect my princess against thousands of those beasts. We have to aid her, Wyatt. And he will. We'll save her and as many people in Woodshaft. They're not traitors, remember? Wyatt reminded her. What do you propose we do? Order the frigate to rush ahead and assist in the ground defense. 8 additional Royal Marines will be a great boon for everyone on board. Meanwhile, we should move to intercept the fleet and try to peel off at least one of their ships. One less ship on their side means fewer ground forces and less firepower to destroy Woodshaft's defenses. He frowned heavily, gritted his teeth, and pointed a finger at himself. And while you fight, I'll take a fighter and set ahead with a tactical mine to booby-trap as many of their shuttles and drop pods as possible in a single blow. You're insane, Cynthia countered. You can't go out there on your own. I'll send 4 Royal Marines to join you in a squadron. Didn't you say that the Royal Marines aren't trained to be pilots? I'll not risk their immeasurable value on something like that. A single fighter is of no threat, or so many believe. And with my size, they won't be able to detect me easily. A single mine won't do much, but it will be a nasty surprise for those murderous bastards, he said angrily. And then what? What do you plan on doing after that, Wyatt? Cynthia asked, voice rising. I'll do my best and take down as many of their pods and shuttles as I can. If they launch fighters, I'll run away, he replied. I'm not suicidal, but we have to stop them, or at least weaken them until the prince can engage them. Then stop talking nonsense, Wyatt. This isn't a simulation. If you go out there alone on a fighter, you'll likely die, and I have been ordered to protect you, Cynthia countered. Wyatt bared his teeth in anger. Have you ever fought against the Drazen? Any of you? He asked, eyeing Cynthia, Galt, and everyone else on the bridge. No one answered him. I'm sure you all know about them, seen the videos and heard the stories, but you have no idea what it's really like to face them and witness what they do to their prisoners. They eat other sapients, don't they? Galt asked, giving voice to the voice of his fellow prisoners. Don't be so stupid as to believe that fake propaganda, Galt, Wyatt shot back. The Drazen don't eat people the way we understand. They don't have mouths to begin with. Imagine this. There's a plant-like monster that looks to be a collection of vines, leaves, and gross protruding limbs coming at you. They stink, too, like rotten meat, and their surface is reddish or brown, adding to how disgusting they look. It looks vaguely humanoid, standing on 4 legs with 8 vines acting like arms and 4 smaller arms sticking out from their bellies. The pilot paused for a moment to take a step forth toward Cynthia. Each limb is tipped with dagger-like claws capable of tearing you open with ease. These things also have a head. Or rather, it looks like a head with a dozen eyes and no mouth. It has a series of multicolored bioluminescent leaves that it uses to talk between each other. And this thing can be up to 3 meters tall. He took another step forward. His eyes were wide and full of controlled, measured hatred. And worst of all, you can look into its eyes and understand that it knows you're sapient. A sophont just like it is, and that last glimmer of hope that you think you have of appealing to its humanity is gone. Another step. The Drazen don't have humanity. They don't understand it. They don't care for it. To them, you are either food or a tool to get more food. Do you want to know what they do to their feed, the prisoners they capture? Another step. Galt took a step back, frightened by the pilot's cold, focused words. Cynthia remained immovable, and the Royal Marines listened closely, ready to interject. They kill the old, the sick, and the disabled. They're not even cruel about it. They aren't sadistic beasts. They are much worse, because the way they kill their feed is by draining their fluids out. Blood, piss, water, bile, everything. Another step. They then mix it with dirt and other materials for the next step. After that, they chop you up without care. Meat and organs are turned into mush. Another step. Your bones are turned to dust, and they mix it all together before they reveal their real head, hidden behind their reinforced chest. Another step. Their true face has no eyes. It's just a bulbous thing similar to a mushroom and a tiny mouth. Only after that they begin to eat their feed, Slurping it with detestable gusto, one final step put him in front of Cynthia, his face reflecting on her helmet's visor. That's what is coming to Woodshaft. They take prisoners alive and dead alike, but they prefer living ones because, to them, we are cattle, nothing more. He chuckled darkly. Oh, sure, they can be negotiated with, they're not stupid, but they don't respect anyone that isn't them, and they only care about their survival. But what do you think they do to the young and the fit? Slaves? They don't need them, but feed makes more feed. With a final snarl, he pulled back and he sighed deeply. I'll be damned if I don't do everything in my power to stop the fucking Drazen. Eyeing Galt, he noticed the noble nearly emptied his stomach. Some of the prisoners were not as strong. He looked at the noble for long moments, then pointed at him. Were you truly ignorant of the Drazen, Galt? Yes, Galt replied, managing to stop himself from gagging. I knew that Drazen were dangerous, but nothing like what you described. Even so, I wouldn't have participated in any scheme regarding those beasts. Less so now, thanks to you. Shaking his head, he pressed his uniform, fixed his badge, and saluted. On behalf of the House Tirome, I, Glat Tirome, request that I and my crew assist you in this dire situation, Lady Cynthia. Cynthia finally moved after Wyatt's retelling and turned to Galt. Do you think we are foolish enough to trust you, traitor? I went against the last command of Lord Samuel. I have tarnished the dignity and name of my house for such an action, bringing it shame. But I can live with that shame if you allow us to aid you, Lady Cynthia. Please, there are countless people in Woodshaft, Galt insisted. Before Cynthia could speak, Wyatt beat her to the punch. Do you expect me to believe that you want to save petty criminals and smugglers, most of whom are commoners and disgraced nobles at best? Galt's eyes turned resolute and his voice filled with conviction. That may be so, but they are still human, Wyatt. The Drazen are enemies to us all. Our disputes, loyalties, and bondages can be set aside in favor of a common goal, even if just for a few hours. Please, let us help you, he said, turning to Cynthia. Do with me as you wish afterward, Lady Cynthia. The Royal Marines are deadly and remarkable, but we have experience dealing with this ship. It doesn't have an AI to run it. Let us focus on doing our jobs while you focus on controlling the ship. If any of us attempt to do anything that may be perceived as sabotage, tampering, or treason, you can overpower us with ease. We are of no threat to you. Cynthia didn't reply. Instead, she turned to Wyatt and stared at him firmly from behind her helmet. The pilot understood and pointed at the prisoners. Anyone willing to stain your honor and dignity by doing your best to save the lives of filthy commoners and the very people you tried to subjugate before we arrived, get up now! To his surprise, over half of them stood up without hesitation. A few seconds later, and second-guessing, a dozen more joined them. Only 12 of them, including the unconscious woman, remained still. He turned to Cynthia, staring at her with a serious flow in his eyes. Are you certain of this, Wyatt? She asked, her voice icy and serious. I'm already responsible for their actions, aren't I? There's a possibility I'll die in this battle anyway. I have nothing to lose, and if that gives us an advantage, I'll take it. Will you allow this? Wyatt asked, lowering his arm. Cynthia closed her eyes behind her helmet and smiled softly. Then she spoke. As long as you know it is your responsibility, then I shall allow this. Galt Tirome, your standing companions are henceforth conscripted temporarily to serve the Principality and His Majesty, the Prince. To your stations. Ma'am, Galt Tirome said, saluting enthusiastically before running to his station. The other crew members also joined him, taking a seat in their respective stations without interrupting the Royal Marines already manning a console. Then I shall go too, Wyatt said, hands trembling. Do you have experience in naval command? Do you? Cynthia countered. Probably less than what you have, he replied before putting on his helmet. Opening a private channel, he continued. After I leave, we won't be able to communicate. Where's the frigate? Burning at full speed toward Woodshaft. We were close enough for our short-range connection to partially work, Cynthia replied. Are you sure you want to do this, Wyatt? Fuck no, he answered sincerely and chuckled. But I don't see any other alternative. All we can really do is weaken the Drazen and give Woodshaft the best fighting chance possible. If I die, could you inform my family that I died making them proud? I don't need to, because you will come back alive. We need a man of your stature and talent, Wyatt. Cynthia replied, "and when you come back, you will have to tell me how is it that you got to know the Drazen so personally." "If I come back, I will. It's not a pleasant memory, but I shall obey," Wyatt replied. "What do you know about Drazen ships?" "Very little. Alien interactions were not a central part of my education and training," Cynthia admitted. "Any advice will be most welcome. Target their biggest ship if at all possible. Aim for their hangars. Drazen ships place their bridges near the center of their ships and their engines are well protected. Their shields are poor, so use missiles and railguns to wither them, then punch them. They are also slow to change their direction, but they mount retro-propulsors on the front for quick deceleration." "You are quite knowledgeable about the Drazen, Wyatt," Cynthia said, engraving the information given into her mind. "More than I would like. I hate those damn plants," he said. Then he turned to leave. "Good luck, Cynthia." "Stay safe, Wyatt," Cynthia replied. Wyatt then broke into a run, heading to the hangar bay as quickly as he could. Thanks to his helmet, the map of the Noir Navio was in full display and the quickest path was highlighted. It only took him 10 minutes to reach the hangar. Despite his hurry, he took a moment to admire the beauty of it and the 30 Raptor fighters stationed in it. Despite being able to hold 100, it was obvious that aside from the ship and the weaponry, everything was to be provided by its new owners. Then the Castons, now the Prince. He shook his head and boarded the fighter closest to him. Luckily for him, it was fully loaded, equipped with a tactical mine, the missiles were stocked, and the flares and ammo were full. Turning it on, the hangar bay's door opened smoothly to reveal the blackness of space. The clasps were unlocked, and he hit the thrusters. His tactical display showed the stationary position of Woodshaft and the predicted movements of the Drazen. If there was one thing he was glad to know about the Drazen, that was the fact that they rarely changed their tactics. "Computer, calculate the possible fleet's movements." "Calculating," the fighter's AI replied. 2 seconds later, the path remained the same with only one possible alteration. Wyatt thought and paused for a moment to look at his trembling hands. His heart was beating hard. He could hear white noise and his stomach was doing somersaults. "What am I doing? This could get me killed for real. But these are Drazen raiders. Even if it kills me, I'll make sure to take down as many of them as I can. They show no mercy and they don't deserve any," he argued in his mind, filled with hatred, but quickly managed to reel his feelings back. "Focus, Wyatt. Steady mind, steady hand." Activating the outside cameras, he focused on the quickly shrinking, menacing vessel, and a shiver ran up his spine. "I'm truly glad that thing is on our side now," he muttered, then focused on braking as fast as possible to a possible interjection point. It wasn't a good plan. It wasn't a desperate plan. It wasn't even a stupid plan. It was just unimaginative. But what else can I do? Stink up the bridge? At least out here I can do some good. With any luck, we'll buy the Prince enough time to enter the destroy or chase off the Drazen. I bet Uriel Hoax is going to send out his small fleet to do harassing actions once the Drazen are close enough, he thought deeply, then hummed in frustration. But why are they here? Gintrax hasn't seen an incursion in decades. Are the Castons behind it, or is this just a coincidence? It's still too soon for pirates and Drazen to take advantage of the situation. What the hell is going on here? He muttered to himself, questions without answers and speculations running through his mind freely. Suddenly the alarms went off and the AI spoke. "Alert! Detecting enemy fighters within sensor range." Wyatt made a close-up of his tactical display and cursed when he saw 30 dots appear dangerously close to his position. Their trajectory was also clear. They were hunting him. How in the world did they— Shit! Stupid! He cursed himself. In his stupor, he'd forgotten the speed he was traveling at. Fast. Too fast. Fast enough that the Drazen would easily detect him. But why did they send so many fighters? Oh no. No. They think I'm leading more fighters. They're here to clear the way. Clutching his controllers, he gritted his teeth when the AI alerted him a second later that missiles were locked and headed his way. "That's how you want to play, eh?" he shouted at the screen, the external view shifting to the barely visible fighters heading his way. The shroud of fear and dread vanished from within him, replaced only by righteous fury, and a controlled, calculated, focused rage. Launching one missile to intercept, he pushed the fighter to the max and slowly turned to meet his enemies. The missile exploded, causing a series of smaller explosions to follow suit. As he approached the screen of Drazen fighters, Wyatt saw that all of them unleashed a barrage of missiles, and so he unleashed his flares until they were empty. "Computer, active the tactical mine. No automatic trigger, only manual detonation," he ordered, and a ping later his order was carried. Predictably, the missiles' targeting systems were confused and scrambled. Some exploded outright before they reached him, while others veered away, forever lost until their timers ran out. Closer and closer they got at tremendous speeds until he was about to enter the effective range of their conventional weapons. His chest hurt, and the pressure of such intense G-forces threatened to crush him. Wyatt smiled widely, undeterred, and with the press of a button, the mine was detached and tailing behind him. Then he took a nosedive so intense that nearly knocked him unconscious. It was almost as bad as the hot drop maneuver, but it served its purpose. With another press of a button, the mine detonated. Wyatt didn't stop to count and instead focused on what to do next. His shields received impacts and were quickly depleting, so he began to barrel roll and weaving erratically to evade enemy fire. His senses were in a haze, but he was still able to focus on 3 targets. Locking on them, he released his missiles instead of launching them, allowing them to float in space until the Drazen fighters flew past them. Then, the missiles activated and gave chase to the bulkier, slower, less maneuverable fighters. 10 seconds later, 3 more fighters were gone, their shields ruptured by the force of the explosion and still far from recharging. Wyatt smiled even as a trail of warm liquid touched his lips and cheeks. Licking it away, he hit the reverse thrusters without turning off his engine and at the same time swung to the side. He could hear his fighter's hull protesting against the highly dangerous maneuver. Wyatt sunk against his seat, the dampeners put to their maximum strain, but he still managed to retain enough consciousness in him to squeeze the trigger. Then he was behind a Drazen fighter, destroying it after 2 seconds of sustained fire. Then he destroyed another, and a fourth one in quick succession in the span of a few seconds. He stopped rolling and stabilized his fighter when he noticed that not a single dot remained on his tactical display. His ears were ringing, his vision was blurry, he tasted metal, and he felt as if his head was about to kill him. He had let his instinct, intuition, training, and fury take hold of him, and he just went with it. Now, he was paying the consequences of his actions. "I'm pretty sure I only survived thanks to the implants. He chuckled weakly, smirking. "Pretty sure I broke something." He coughed, staining his chin with blood. "Took them down, though. I should go back to the ship. I can't do more now," he said, and looked at his tactical display. He quickly found a possible destination of the Noir Navio since it was already outside his sensor and visual range, and with the scramblers and jammers of the Drazen, he couldn't contact Cynthia. Bereft of options, Wyatt clenched his teeth and kicked the engines to maximum, ready to return to the ship. It took him nearly 20 minutes to reach visual range with the Noir Navio, as he had to ensure more Drazen fighters wouldn't detect him. He had more than half the ammo left for his coil guns, but without a mine, missiles, or flares, there was nothing much he could do. His desperate and sudden maneuvers had put a real strain on the fighter, and the AI kept reminding him of several minor damages and that he should return to base immediately, not to mention the wounds he had sustained. When he was 10,000 kilometers away from the ship, his short-range communicator cracked to life. "Wyatt, is that you?" Cynthia asked, unsure. "Yeah, it's me," he replied, trying to maintain his composure. But his chest hurt. The world around him was spinning, and he felt lightheaded. "Did you encounter Drazen fighters?" she asked seriously. "A few, yeah, nothing I couldn't handle, but my plan was ruined. I had to use my missiles and the tactical mine to drive them off," he said, wincing. Technically, he wasn't lying, but there was no need to worry Cynthia with his pointless problems. "I understand. Come, enter, and join me on the bridge," she ordered. Wyatt saw the hangar opening as he approached, slowing down as he did so. Landing without support proved to be difficult, but he managed to land and station his fighter safely. He opened his cockpit and stepped out, only to fall on the 5th stair, landing on his back. He laid there for a moment, dazzled, before struggling to get to his feet again. He coughed violently, his lips and chin staining with fresh blood. "Definitely broke something!" With a wheeze and a snarl of pain, he stood upright. He turned to see the fighter, and his eyes widened when he saw the real damage it had taken. While the majority of the damage was bound to be internal, the wings were slightly bent and out of alignment. There were hull ruptures all across its surface, and the impact of high-velocity shots marred the otherwise pristine paint of the Raptor fighter, painted with the Caiston colors. Letting out another snarl of pain, he turned around and began to walk, making his way back to the bridge. "Cynthia?" he asked warily, opening a private channel as the hangar doors closed. "I am here, Wyatt," she replied in her usual serious tone. "How far are we from the Drazan ships?" he asked. "We are still moving blindly to a predicted vector. We should have visual confirmation in the next 10 minutes, she replied. "Are you injured? You sound winded." The fight was intense, had to do a hard pull. He winced again without muttering his discomfort. "Damn glad Commander Redford got me those implants now. Pretty sure I wouldn't have been able to beat those fighters otherwise so easily," he ended with a cocky chuckle. "I would have died without the Kiniter and Dolaxis implants after I pulled that crazy movement," he thought, wincing again. "As long as you are certain that you are fight-worthy, then I shall not press the matter," Cynthia replied. Then, after a pregnant pause, she asked, "Wyatt, I have been discussing possible strategies with the Royal Marines, and I am unsure. I am not trained for command outside leading small strike forces. You are the expert when it comes to space warfare compared to us. I will need your input." She paused again, her voice relaxing. "Truth be told, I am relieved you returned to us soon safely." "Yeah, I'm just bruised like cowkie meat ready to be grilled," he thought with dark humor. "I'm a pilot, Cynthia. Before this, I wasn't even trained to be a real fighter pilot, but I was good enough to earn my place in patrol duties. But I will," he clenched his teeth, suppressing a cough and feeling his blood stain and wash through his teeth. "I will do everything in my power to aid you." "I am relieved to hear that," she sighed. "To be honest, I am terrified. I'm not like my sister, Juliana. The responsibilities of command are beyond my capabilities. And command is something I was never trained for, and after serving Commander Redford, I have concluded that command is not something I'd aspire to. Nobles lead and commoners obey. That is the imperative rule of the Principality," he replied, each step an effort as his head pounded and everything around him kept spinning. "Regardless, I will welcome your aid and input, Wyatt," Cynthia replied. Wyatt was about to reply when a sudden realization entered his mind. "Cynthia, have you asked Galt for advice? He's the lieutenant commander of the ship and Samuel's direct assistant. Surely he must know. I'd rather not trust a traitor and possibly give him any sort of command over the Noir Navio," she declared seriously. "Would you trust him?" "No, I can't say I would, under other circumstances. But Galt seems to have common sense. And he's already putting his neck on the line assisting us against the Drazan," Wyatt countered. "You can't possibly suggest that I should trust his tactical advice," she rebuked. "All right, let's have a test. Tell me, what is your main plan to attack the Drazan ships?" he asked. "According to your previous advice, move in close to the largest vessel and engage it with a barrage of missiles and torpedoes to take down its shields. Then attack using the plasma cannons, the railguns, and the laser turrets. Finish it off with the pulse beam cannon," Cynthia answered. "It is the one strategy that we have agreed upon so far." "I know you're not familiar with space combat, but sweet mercy, woman, what? All right. I did say that you should target the largest ship, but not in a direct confrontation," he thought, dismayed. His side protested, and he let out an involuntary groan of pain. "I suspect that means you do not approve?" Cynthia asked, taking the groan as his answer. "Your plan has many flaws. Mainly speaking, you're making the mistake many make. You think that ships are going to slug it out on equal terms," he explained. "Every ship has a purpose and a role to play in and out of battles. This isn't a battle cruiser. This is a stealth destroyer, Cynthia. You've got to exploit its advantages in your favor." He paused for a moment, leaning against a wall as his vision dimmed for a second. "Space combat is tri-dimensional. Take advantage of that fact. But the protocols of space combat do not matter against the Drazan," he snapped back, punching the wall. "You have to play dirty against a superior foe or any enemy whatsoever. As long as you can remain hidden from their sensors, they won't be able to fight back immediately. Who knows how many more fighters they have? The ship has many PD turrets, but it won't be able to do much against hundreds of those bastards." He paused to gather his strength and continue on his way to the bridge. "Then "What do you propose?" Cynthia asked, her voice stoic and firm. "Tell Galt about your plan as a hypothetical. If he agrees with you, then you can't trust him. He'll only care about kissing your, staying in your good graces. If he argues about decorum or the rules of engagement, then he's just incompetent. But if he tells you something similar to what I told you, then you can trust him when he says he knows more about what this ship is capable of doing," Wyatt explained. "Just ask him. We have nothing to lose and little time to spare." Cynthia let out a deep hum before replying. "You're serious about this," she stated in bewilderment. "You are full of surprises, Lieutenant Wyatt Staples. Very well. I have put my trust in you before. So has Clara. I shall do so again and take this risk." Wyatt didn't reply, but continued to walk as fast as he could. After several moments of walking through the empty, silent hallways, he heard Cynthia's voice come to life. "I asked Galt Tyram, and he replied that such a strategy would put us at great risk. He then proceeded to describe that we should make full use of the Noir Navio's capabilities to strike in surprise and cripple or destroy one of their ships in an alpha strike." She chuckled deeply. "Are you certain that you are not capable of command, Wyatt?" Wyatt laughed. "That's what I would do if I was in a fighter." "Are you seeing a destroyer as a fighter?" Cynthia asked, surprised. "Not quite. I just don't like fighting fair. That gets you killed," Wyatt replied, unable to filter his words properly, but not really caring about it at the moment. "And by any deities out there, the Drazen don't deserve any fairness whatsoever. Why not advantage of everything this ship was designed to do and is capable of performing?" "I understand," Cynthia replied wisely. "Do you?" he questioned before noticing that he was close to the bridge. He stopped, pressed his suit, took a deep breath, and began walking as if nothing was wrong. Half a minute later, he opened the doors to the bridge and walked in a hurry. Galt and those who had joined him were at their stations, strapped and ready for battle. The remaining prisoners were also strapped to empty seats, bounded. The Royal Marines were still hard at work, unflinching and unmoving. And Cynthia was standing next to the captain's seat? "Cynthia," he asked, confused, but the blue-haired woman didn't reply through the private channel. When he was a mere 5 meters apart, Cynthia suddenly kneeled in front of him, and before he could ask what she was doing, she spoke up. "I, Cynthia Winfield, proud daughter of Leona Winfield and Benjamin Winfield, relinquish command of this vessel, the APNV Noir Navio, under the new command of Lieutenant Wyatt Staples, under the rules of the chain of command," she declared loudly so that everyone present could hear her voice. "Lieutenant Wyatt Staples, if you will?" Wyatt stopped dead in his tracks, stunned. His mind was reeling from what had just happened, and his injuries were not helping. Finally, after several seconds, he gasped, his lungs reminding him that he needed to breathe. No, I refuse. No, Cynthia. No, I'm just a commoner. I can't command. It is not my place nor my duty." Cynthia took off her helmet, eyeing the trembling pilot with a firm, stony stare. "You have no real option on the matter, Wyatt. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Besides that, you are the only Royal Navy personnel on active duty aboard the ship." She smirked. "You outrank any of us. The Royal Marines are not part of the Navy. They serve House Astor directly, me included. I serve my princess. And the rest? They are prisoners and traitors, powerless." Wyatt had to take a step back, failing faint. She was right. He knew that she was right, and he knew that was a damn poor excuse to suddenly thrust him into a commanding position. Leading a squadron of fighters was one thing, but to be the acting commander of an entire vessel was another thing entirely. Why are you doing this? I'm a filthy commoner. I am unworthy. I can't—" "You can do this, Wyatt," Cynthia replied, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. She placed a hand on his shoulder and offered him a sincere smile. "I am lacking in this specific field. Right now, with the life of my princess in jeopardy, I care not that you're a commoner. By necessity and by law, you are the only one capable of commanding this ship into battle. Protecting my princess and thousands of innocents is all that matters now." "Then why move to intercept the Drazen at all? You could have ignored that suggestion and moved to Woodshaft from the start," Wyatt protested, unable to look away from the blue eyes of the red-armored woman. "I listened because I trust you to do what is needed to be done, Wyatt. You opened my eyes that I would have caused the loss or heavy damage to this ship with my poor strategic mind with little to show for it. Come now and take command of the Noir Navio. Her eyes narrowed. Or let the Drazen kill more people due to your negligence. That caused Wyatt to stop panicking, and his eyes widened in hatred. He snarled, ignoring the pain now coursing all across his body. He scanned the room and found all eyes turned to him. Even the Royal Marines were staring at the altercation, ready to move at Cynthia's command. If that's the case, he began, placing a hand on Cynthia's shoulder, matching her hold, then let's kill some Drazen. If it means saving people, Clara, and dead Drazen bodies, then I'll commit sacrilege. Fuck the consequences, he said, fuming, and feeling the pain start to vanish as adrenaline flooded his veins. But I don't have the necessary implants to connect with the ship. That won't be an issue, Galt Terome said, approaching with caution. This ship has a VR interface similar to the training chambers. The command of the captain's chair is not limited to nobility like any other ship in the Principality, Wyatt Staples, he said, resolute and offering a salute. Ready to assist you in this endeavor, Lieutenant? Then, let's begin, Wyatt said, smiling underneath his helmet. Cynthia let go and he did the same, moving to the captain's chair. He admired it for a moment, conflicting emotions and arguments clashing within him. He shook his head defiantly and slowly sat down. He watched as Cynthia put on her helmet and moved to the station he had mained not too long ago, sitting next to Galt Terome. She quickly connected with the terminal and his senses exploded. It was light being flashbanged, but without losing his sight. He heard wires connecting with his helmet and his visor darkened, only to be replaced by a visual representation of being in a cockpit. But instead of a fighter, he was commanding the entire ship itself. Its sensors were his sensors, the exterior cameras were his eyes, and he could practically feel the pleasant heat of the engines, the power of the reactor, and the uncanny maneuverability a ship of that size had. This is otherworldly. Everything is so immense, he thought as he tried to make sense of the overwhelming sensations and information being presented before him. Wyatt, can you hear me? Cynthia asked, concerned. Yes, I hear you. I have no words, he replied. Since you lack the Antara and Ledium implants, I shall process the information for you and send graph representations to your helmet. Do not worry. This is simple for me. All you have to do is give us commands and we shall obey, Cynthia reassured. I suppose I won't have time to get used to this, he muttered, eyes narrowing. I'm seeing the Drazen fleet at the edge of the sensors. I can't control the cameras. Let's see. Focus on exterior camera U9 section 18. Magnify, he ordered tentatively, and a second later his order came to life as his vision shifted abruptly to zoom at a sector of space that showed 5 deceptively beautiful ships leaving behind bluish plumes that propelled them forth. The cruiser-class ships were shaped like large almonds, with smooth ridges and not a visible deck on their exterior. They were thicker than any Principality ship and were heavily armored, trusting it more than shields. In length alone, they were over 3 kilometers, nearly half of it in width and only 300 meters in height. The 3 destroyer-class ships were around 2 kilometers long, and they looked like the curved claws of a predator, sharing the same deceptively friendly exterior that the cruisers had. Anyone dumb enough to judge the aesthetics of a ship to match the potential character of its builders had come to find a nasty, terrible end at the stalks of the Drazen. Distance until we are within railgun effective range? He asked. 2 million kilometers and closing, Galt replied. Estimated time to reach effective distance. 2 minutes and 40 seconds, sir. How many missiles do we have? He asked, still trying to read through all the information on his view screen. Instead of a direct answer, he got a highlighted response, showcasing that the ship had 400 Hawk missiles to spare for each pod, and the pods were already loaded with a full salvo of 5 missiles each. Running through the information quickly, he saw that they had 100 rending torpedoes, 2 already loaded and ready to fire. The PD and heavy laser turrets were ready to fire too. All weapons ready. Prepare the plasma cannons and the spinal mount, he ordered, an idea forming in his mind. Following his command, the plasma cannons were heating up steadily along with the pulse beam cannon. Sir, we are well outside the effective range of those weapons and the heat buildup may reveal our positions sooner than intended, Galt warned. Who said I was planning to enter inside their effective range? Wyatt retorted, smirking beneath his helmet. Time until they are inside of our missile's maximum range? 20 seconds, Cynthia replied. All right, Wyatt, keep calm, focus. Drazon ships are slow to turn, but they can take a punch. All you need to do is peel one away. Wait, what if... Could that even work? Am I willing to risk doing something like that in this situation? He thought, ideas and plans running through his head 1,000 miles a second. We have entered maximum missile range, sir. 2 minutes until we enter railgun effective range, Galt announced. Well, desperate times call for desperate measures. If it ends with more Drazon dead, then I'll be happy, he thought, heart beating loudly in his chest. Can the nearest destroyer be locked? Barely, but yes. The Navio's superior cyber warfare suits are countering the scramblers effectively the closer we get to them, Cynthia announced. Wyatt didn't hesitate. Lock it down and fire all missiles at it. Give it a full barrage. Reload immediately and fire a second volley. Then take us in as soon as it turns to face us, he ordered. In his expanded field of view, he saw a deluge of 40 missiles flying in the same direction. 10 seconds later, another volley fired. The wait was both eternal and short as he watched the target destroyer veer to the side, having detected the missiles at an agonizing 10 seconds before they struck their target. The PD turrets came to life and began firing at the incoming barrage, managing to destroy half of them before the rest impacted against its shields. The second volley fared better, as only a dozen missiles were taken down before the rest struck the destroyer. The shields flickered, but didn't die. They have no doubt detected us. That destroyer is moving in an intercept course, Cynthia warned. Wyatt smirked. Railguns? He asked. A minute out of effective range, sir, Galt replied. Turn the ship to a 45 angle downward and accelerate to 60% capacity. Present the topside railguns to the enemy and fire at coordinates X733, Y267, Z990 in 10 seconds, he ordered with a confidence that he didn't feel within him. Full barrage of missiles are to follow 3 seconds later. Wyatt waited to see if the first part of his gambit was going to work. Luckily for him, his orders were followed. The railguns fired at open space, and the missiles followed suit, flying directly at the destroyer. Before the missiles even covered half their distance, he gave a new order. Accelerate to 80% speed and do a hard turn at a 30-degree angle to port now. The strain of the high G maneuver was felt a second later, but the smile on his face was evident. With such awkward movements, it gave the impression that he was trying to run away, an irresistible prey that the Drazon would hardly give up on. And he was right. The Drazon destroyer matched his movements just in time for 2 railgun impacts to impact its shields. The first impact killed the weakened shields, and the second went straight through the ship, puncturing it. Moments later, the barrage of missiles impacted the confused, wounded vessel, causing several explosions across its structure. Now wounded, the ship tried to disengage. Sadly for it, though, the Navio had closed the distance thanks to its sudden change, putting in effective range of the railguns. The Drazon only then realized that it had fallen for a trap, not a weak, fruitless retaliation. It fired a heavy barrage of missiles at them, but it didn't matter. Not anymore. Fire! Wyatt ordered, pouring as much hatred as he could into a single word. The railguns fired, and in less than the blink of an eye, the 4 shots impacted the Drazon destroyed. Not a single shot punctured the core, but the engines died and the ship began to drift freely, either dead or crippled. He watched as the PD turrets emerged from their secluded locations to fire at the coming missiles, shooting down all but 10, which impacted against the shields, draining the first shield by 5%. He allowed himself a deep, boisterous laugh, savoring the demise of so many Drazon. But it was not time to gloat. He had lives to save and more Drazon to kill, as long as the second part of his gamble worked. Keep acceleration. Head straight at the nearest cruiser. Prepare to fire the pulse beam cannon, he ordered, smiling widely. Wyatt? Cynthia questioned, confused. I thought you said you weren't trying to fight them head-on. I am not, he replied, focusing on his objective and smiling more when he detected fighters swarming out their hangars. Noting the alert that the pulse beam was almost ready to fire, he counted down the seconds until the charge was full. He could almost feel it. The power stored across the entire vessel, ready to be unleashed. Target the center of the cruiser, he said, his attention focused on his target. With the confirmation of the target locked and aligned, he shouted, "Fire!" His eyes were wide and his heart skipped a beat when he felt the ship shudder before releasing a thick stream of pure blue energy of hyper-accelerated, superheated particles at a significant fraction of the speed of light. It was a deadly weapon with incredible accuracy and range that could kill any unprotected ship in one hit and do massive damage to any improperly defended or weak dedicated warships, if it hit them. Firing at anything smaller than a fixed station or a cruiser was folly, as smaller targets could easily avoid it in time unless they were in kill range, which would only put a ship equipped with a pulse beam cannon at unnecessary risk, making the weapon all but useless. And at longer ranges, any ship could also evade it with enough time give to take notice of the coming attack. What Galt, Cynthia, and everyone else saw was the Drazen cruiser activate its retro propulsors, decelerating abruptly and shifting to an upward vector, completely evading the attack. What Wyatt saw was his victory. Yes, the cruiser dodged the attack, but that was never his target. His target was the other cruiser moving at a mere 50,000 kilometers apart from its sister ship. A mere second of difference for the beam of blue death that impacted the cruiser in full. And, as luck would have it, the beam struck its side as its hangars were open and disgorging its fighters. It punctured straight through the shields, as if they were paper, impacted the hull, and exploded inward. 2 seconds later, the ship exploded, and Jintrax was once again illuminated by the brief life of a second star that consumed the fighters that surrounded it. "Ha ha 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 ha!" Wyatt laughed loudly and maniacally. "Take that, you monsters! Go die in a fire!" he exclaimed before noticing that the other 2 destroyers and the remaining cruisers, along with the deployed fighters, were now moving to intercept the Nornavio. Shaking off from his momentary glee, he gave his new orders. "Peel away, keep them at range, disengage, let them chase us and tire." That was all Wyatt said before darkness overtook him. "Wyatt!" Cynthia cried out in worry when she saw him collapse. "You heard him. Evasive maneuvers. Don't let them catch us. Move as far away from Woodshaft as possible," she ordered before unbuckling herself from her seat. As she moved, the strain of the G-forces they were under hit her in full, without the dampeners to aid her. But she managed to withstand it as she moved to Wyatt. When she was a few meters away from him, she felt the pressure decreasing. "They won't be able to catch us as long as we maintain 50% speed," said one of the Royal Marines. Cynthia gave her silent thanks to the Marine and moved Wyatt, disconnecting his helmet from the chair's interface. She took off his helmet, and despite her training and everything she'd done, she couldn't suppress a gasp at what she saw. Wyatt was unconscious and was barely breathing, but his eyes were partly open and they were red shut, bloody. Tears of blood ran down his face and cheeks. His mouth was open, drooling a mix of saliva and blood. His teeth were entirely red. His lips were busted, his chin and neck were drenched in fresh and dried blood, and fresh blood ran out from his nostrils. Cynthia gritted her teeth and cursed internally. If she moved him recklessly from the chair and the dampeners, he'd die. She couldn't take him to the infirmary, and her knowledge of first aid was reduced to her own and those sharing her genetic and cybernetic alterations. Thinking quickly, she pulled out a syringe from within her chest. 1/5 of a dosage should be enough, she muttered, before pressing the syringe against Wyatt's neck and pressing it gently, pouring the black solution into his body. "Come on, Wyatt, don't die. Don't die."